Good morning, everybody. It's been a long time since I've got to speak at this campus. They were asking me, hey, Pastor Darrel, can you speak on October the 14th? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to be in town. That would be awesome. And they said, oh, by the way, you're going to be speaking on marriage and the submit passage. And I was like, oh, okay, Pastor Robert, so you take that weekend off. All right, good. Smart guy. But when we talk about marriage and mutual submission, it's a loaded topic. I believe it's all about the little things that are strung together, and sometimes they can turn into big things. We're going to chat about it, but when I start talking about marriage, some of you guys are like, okay, I'm going to check out on this one because I don't need to pay attention. But some of us, marriage brings up all kinds of different thoughts. For some of us, we have great memories of that. Some of us have kind of hurtful memories of marriage. It's a challenge in that way for many of us. Some of us might be single in the room and thinking about that as a possibility of marriage in the future, or perhaps just on a journey right now of contentment and learning to be in this season of life and what that looks like. You might be in your 20s and you're thinking about marriage down the future, or for you guys in this row, a couple rows down here, you guys might be in about 30 or 40 years, you guys might want to think about. But if you're thinking in your 20s, I want to ask you this question. Who are you looking for right now? I would encourage you that you would begin right now, if you're thinking, and this is in your future, that you would begin to look for somebody that loves God with all their heart. That's going to be a key deal, because it's going to that decision right there will make its way into your calendars down the road, and there'll be some conflicts that you'll have to navigate through. And just to have that likeness of both trying to do your best to love God with all your heart is such a great blessing to go on that journey. So you have that. Also ask yourself the question, who are you becoming? Who are you becoming as a person? Am I becoming like the person that I would like to marry? And so all the things that I hold in esteem in those kind of ways. You might be in a place where you are in the midst of healing, or you need healing in your life. You might have been married for a long time, and you're in a place where you can mentor people. Take a kind of a young couple along and mentor them along the way. Maybe you're in a place where you just like to get from this place of struggling to thriving, and to learn what it would be like to thrive. Well, we're going to talk about mutual submission this weekend, and seriously, we tested this, didn't we, Andra? It's all you. I'm dropping the clicker. We tested it in between, and it worked just fine, and not now. That doesn't matter. So mutual submission is foundational for every single relationship in the world, but specifically when it comes to marriage. And the quest for mutual submission, I really believe, is all about the little things. The little things. Because the little things, if you string a bunch of little things together, somewhere down the road you're going to get some phrases like, you always, you never. And it's usually not because of that one thing. It's usually because of all the little things that came along the way. So there's these challenges inside of us, right? One of them is our need to be right. Does anyone like to be right? Raise your hand if you like to be right. Yeah, look at those hands around there. Some of you guys shouldn't be sitting next to each other right now. How many of you just don't care? Anybody? You just don't care? Okay, we had one last service. We actually have 3 or 4. And you just kind of go with the flow, Now, remember that. That's a good thing too, right? How about this? Selfishness. You're like, well, Pastor Darrel, I'm not selfish. Yes, you are. We're all selfish in some kind of way. I want to share with you my own little journey. I'll throw myself under the bus a little bit. This year, my wife and I celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary, which was super cool. Awesome. And along that journey, we had planned for this vacation. We planned for it for a long time, and we were going to go to Venice, and then we were going to go all throughout Greece, do a Greek tour. a cruise. And so we're planning, and one of the things that we told each other was, when you go on this trip, when we both go on this trip, we are both going to just be in the moment. And I'm practicing, rehearsing in my head, because this is really hard for me. I'm going to be in the moment. I'm just going to not go through my routine, because if you know me, I'm kind of structured and routine-like, and so I'm going to break out of this, and I'm just going to go with the flow and just have this great time. And that was all great. We get to Venice, how many of you have been to Venice? Anyone? Yeah, isn't that a cool city? I think it's one of my favorite cities. It's one of those places where there's no cars, so you either walk or you take a boat. And it's so picturesque. There were times when I was looking out over the city and the clouds in the background and the skyline where the city kind of looked fake almost. It was like so picturesque that it just had this look to it. Highly recommend, super good. We got there and landed though, and we had taken a long flight over. We stopped on the East Coast and then caught it over, and we land, first thing in the morning, and we got off, and the first day is actually just try to not fall asleep. Just power through and try to do it. And so we decided, I broke my own rule actually. I usually say never take a nap, on that day, and we decided we're going to take a nap, and you have to be so disciplined if you do this. If you take a nap on day one, I'm just going to take a 30-minute nap. How about 5 hours? Or, it could turn in because you just want to go down hard. And then your body clock is just going to be so messed up. So we laid down, I set my alarm, and somehow we got up. It was like 45 minutes or an hour. And we just powered through the day. We get to the nighttime, and we're ready for bed. And we just told each other, you know what? Let's just sleep in tomorrow. Does that sound, how many of you guys like to sleep in every once in a while? Yes? A great thought. And so we went to bed with that great thought. And at 5 in the morning, I'm wide awake. I wake up, and seriously, it's pitch black in our room, and our room's not that big. It's like this little boutique hotel kind of thing. And so we're pitch black in the room. One of the things that I like to do first thing in the morning when I wake up is I like coffee and breakfast. Can I get an amen from coffee? How many of you guys like coffee? I just walk out to the kitchen. I usually have made it beforehand and press the button, and I'm just, yes, it's going to happen soon. And so I like that, except for Sherry was sound asleep. And I had started to convince myself that I could actually get up, use my flashlight, get over to the coffee machine. She wouldn't hear anything. She wouldn't hear it percolating or brewing. She wouldn't smell anything. And it wasn't going to work out so good. I fast forwarded that a little bit, and I thought, at the end of this whole thing, I'm going to file this in the how's that working out for you category of the way we started our day. So I decided not to, and I just laid there until she got up. And then the next thing was, let's go to breakfast, because I like to eat right away. Now, Sherry and I are different in a lot of ways. I like to eat first thing in the morning. She likes to eat later in the morning. Directions, I say go left. She says go right. And one of us can only be right in that, right? And she doesn't read maps that well. So just saying. But it could be like what we want to watch on TV. I want to watch sports, or I want to watch the news, and she wants to watch Chopped, or I want to go surfing. She wants to go to the farmer's market, or all these decisions, And so here I am in the morning saying, I want to eat breakfast. That's what I do. I eat breakfast first. And then I thought, did you ever think of doing something and then you knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but you just kind of momentum carried you through and you did it? Do you ever get to a point where you thought you were being selfish and you kind of knew you were being selfish, but then the momentum carried you through it and you just did something anyway? So here I am going to go to breakfast by myself on the first day of my 35th wedding anniversary vacation. Now, if you do that, that is a rookie move. I'm telling you right there. That is a rookie move. At the end of the day, that is not going to work out good. And so then I decided, by the grace of God, I decided not to go. I was just going to lay it down right there, and I'm in the room. And now I have to do this other thing where my face, when I'm waiting, Sherry's like getting ready, blow drying her hair, putting her makeup on, and I'm ready to go. And there's something on my face. My wife knows it. What are you thinking? And so I'm sitting, waiting, trying not to have that look on my face, because the last thing that you want is to have the look on your face. And she goes, fine, just go ahead and go. That is not going to work out. I'm telling you, that's a super rookie move too. So I decided to not go. And we started our day off awesome. And I didn't have coffee until later. I was having shakes. But that is really what's that tension, right? It's a tension, mutual submission. What does that look like for ourselves in our lives when we're going through all of these things? So the selfishness thing creeps in. All of those things are happening, and this really is a quest about our reflexes. What are our reflexes when we're in those moments? Is it, I'm going to get my way? I'm going to tell you right now, we can't get our way all the time. There are no battles. Like, everything doesn't have to be a giant battle where I have to get my way in this situation. Mutual submission takes us to this place where we're going to kind of find out the ways of God in it, right? So mutual sacrifice in our marriage. Mutual sacrifice in marriage leads to a beautiful unity. We're going to take a look at a passage in Ephesians chapter 5, if you guys want to turn over there. Super cool passage. Ephesians 5:21 through 33. We're going to look at how in mutual submission, the unity brings about thriving. Thriving in our marriage. What does it look like to thrive? Not just to get by, but to thrive in it. And so verse 21 really is going to be the umbrella clause, what everything else is going to be framed under. And it says this, Paul, he says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another. So mutual submission is the umbrella by which the Apostle Paul is going to frame the rest of it. And he's going to say, I'm going to start out with the wives, and then I'm going to talk about the husbands secondarily. But we kind of have messed this up because we tend to focus on verse 22, and it's does this weird thing, and it's wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Submit. That's not a popular word in our culture. But again, this is under the umbrella of mutual submission, and he's going to talk about the wives first. Now, I love looking at the words, the Greek words that are underlying in here. I nearly fell off the couch when I was reading this one. Wives, submit to your own husbands. I was scrolling across and I clicked on the word. I wonder what the word for own is. That's an interesting word. So I click on it and it's spelled I-D-I-O-S, idios, which sounds a lot like, I was like, oh man, wives, submit yourselves to your idiot husbands. That would have just right there. I was like, are you serious? But that's not the word. I got a little chuckle, though. The Greek word is idiotes. This word actually does mean your own husbands. I'm going to tell you right now, there's a fine line between your own husbands and an idiot husband. I don't know, something impossible. The Apostle Paul's got that. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Now, he's going to talk to the husbands. Again, mutual submission. Here's what it means for the wife. Here's what it means for the husbands. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church. And I want you to listen as he describes Christ and the church, the bride of Christ, the church. I want you to think, husbands, if you would lift up your wife and esteem your wife in this way. Again, mutual submission. Pastor Robert said it last week, right? The wives are, it says to submit and the husbands die. Imagine presenting your wife this way. He presented her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle. Think about that. Without stain, there's no marred kind of thing in your wife. That's the way That's the way we're to present our wives, without wrinkle. That means even after 35 years, or 45 or 55. My wife and we have a goal for ourselves that we'd have a 75th wedding anniversary. I just think that would be so cool. I'll be 96. She'll be like 70-something. Just kidding. Just really kidding. But imagine presenting them without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Even when they're not blameless, or they have stain, or they have wrinkles, but that's how we present them in that way. That's fascinating to me. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does for the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. In a father, mother, and children scenario, you have a biblical command, right? To children, obey your parents. The Apostle Paul would talk to fathers in the Colossian letter, Colossians chapter 3, and he would say, children, obey your parents, but fathers, don't wear out your kids. Don't exasperate your kids. Don't wear them out. So there's this give and take in all of that. But when you leave your father and mother in an obedient relationship, you enter into marriage mutually submissive. Interesting, right? This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Now, we're going to talk about two things this morning. We're going to talk about the husbands and the wives. We're actually going to deal with the husbands first. And I believe this with all my heart. I really do. Based on the way the Apostle Paul, in my opinion, kind of lays a heavier burden on the husband to lay down your life as Christ did for the church. And that I believe that if we do, God created us in such a way, when you do that, you're going to bring out the best in that person. And I'm telling you, you're going to get a return 100 times more when you lay down your life for them and they give back. It's like it starts this whole kind of giving war, right? So husbands are called to demonstrate sacrificial love. Demonstrate sacrificial love. Husbands, love your wives. That word for love, agape, it's unconditional, no strings attached. Love your life the same way that God loved us through Jesus. God so loved the world that he gave, right? That he gave, that to love us that much. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Now, I'm going to say something right now, and I don't want you guys to start freaking out or think I'm being judgy or you know, if you forgot to wear your wedding ring today, or it's getting cleaned, or you cracked it and you broke. I'm just going to say something because I believe this. We need to love our wives out loud. Out loud. In the store. When you're wherever we are, that we would love them out loud. And one of the ways that we do that, and in our culture it's a kind of a tradition, is I'll tell you this. When I do weddings, I don't oversee that many weddings, but when I do, and I love the ring ceremony in a wedding, because the ring has so many beautiful things that I talk about, and I love to talk about it. I love to talk about that they're round, and they symbolize eternal love, never-ending love with each other. They're usually made out of a precious metal. This one's not. It's titanium, I think, so not that super expensive. I actually have several of these rings, different ones, all for the same woman, by the way, just in case you're wondering. I like them. They're like decorative. They don't cost very much. But I like this one in particular. I like this one. I learned this when we were in Greece. This is actually the Greek sign of relationship and harmony in relationship. And I didn't know that until I got over there. Hey, that's that same. Everywhere you look, you see this sign, and it's the same thing on my ring. So I just thought that was super cool. But to love your wife out loud, because what I like to say in the ceremony is this wedding ring symbolizes something. It says something that I belong to someone. This might not be like super popular or whatever, and you can call me old-fashioned or whatever, but I believe it sends a message, and this is part of the way that we can love them out loud. Because this means something when I'm in the store. This also means something when I'm in the store. People will check you out. They're like, oh, maybe there's like a 1 in a million chance that person, and so you're saying there's it's going to say something, right? So this is like, it's the little things. How do we love them? How do we love them out loud? That we lay down our lives in such a way where we would do that. I think it's so critical. God's model requires that a husband would elevate his wife's interests above his own. Now, he says in verse 28, in the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. So it's easy for us to love ourselves. We're going to feed ourselves and, take care of ourselves. But to lift that other person up, even to that level, is going to require a lot to do that. And I believe that's what he calls us to. And one of the things that I think it means is that we don't get our way all the time. We don't get our way all the time. Everything doesn't have to be like a big war. Well, this is the way I have breakfast in the morning and I have coffee, and that's what we're going to do today. It doesn't have to be that. Or I go here. This is what I do on Saturday mornings. This is what I do. My tradition. Maybe not. Maybe you don't have to win that one every time. I'd encourage us to do this. Take turns. So profound, right? Take turns. And I don't mean in a legalistic kind of way. Well, you'd had your way last week, so it's my turn this week. Okay, there you go. It's already going back in the selfish thing, right? Because when we do it that way, practice losing. Practice losing. Like give them 2 or 3 in a row. I see you guys are getting all knotted up out there right now. Seriously. Yeah, take turns. Husbands inspire respect from their wives when they choose unconditional love. I believe that's the way God made us. You're going to inspire your wife. You're going to inspire them in such a way when you choose unconditional love. And that is going against us because we're constantly in this selfish, I got to be right, I want my way. And that's constantly at battle, right? Verse 33 says this, however, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Anyone ever do a love and respect small group? Yeah, it's awesome. They talk about that you, as a husband, you would say loving things to your wife, and they in turn would say respectful things. I found it fascinating that the verb tenses in this little verse right here, that when it says a husband must love their wife, that's the command form of the verb. But when it says the wife must respect the husband, that's the subjunctive form of the word, which is interesting because the command is like stating the facts. This is what you do. You love your wife, but the subjunctive form is stating possibilities. If this happens, then this happens. Fascinating to me that he would say it that way. Love your wife, and that's going to just start this giving kind of thing that goes on where you're loving and they're respecting, and it goes that way. And the crazy cycle, if you took the love and respect classes, what happens when you get into the crazy cycle is it goes the other way. Is you stop saying something loving. You say something unloving to your wife, and then they're going to say something disrespectful back, right? Because that's the opposite of the way God created us. And when you do, you get in this thing called the crazy cycle. And then you're just fighting about everything because everything's a war and everything's a battle, and it's all about the little things, right? And so you're just like, "Ruh," and I say something unloving, and she says something disrespectful, and it goes back. And how do you get out of this? How do you break the crazy cycle? Who goes first? You're pointing at the other one, right? The more mature one. That's who goes first. Wow, I don't like that. But that's true. Who goes first, right? Okay, so loving, you can love so much and love, unconditionally. When I'm trying my best to love Sherry, sometimes I can even screw that up. I'm going to tell you how. So Sherry's a processor. She likes to process things, take her time with stuff. Anyone like that? Anyone like to process things? Yeah, she does. And in some things, like to process things. But in general, I like to get it off my plate and just do it. Get it done. Take care of it right then. Don't put it off. Just like if you can do it, just take care of it. And sometimes that's not so helpful. In this particular circumstance, about 20 years ago, we found out that Sherry had late adult onset high blood pressure. Her dad has it, we found out. We didn't really know. He keeps himself super fit, and even to this day, he's doing all kinds of physical stuff and keeping himself fit, but he has to take blood pressure medication, and Sherry has to take blood pressure medication, and she's been on this routine, and everything's cool, but she's noticed lately that she kind of has this like flushed kind of feeling. That's how she was describing it. So when we were on the vacation, there was one time during the day where she's like, I feel kind of funny. And I feel, flushed, and I could tell her skin was like red. She goes, I feel kind of wobbly, kind of shaky. And I took she took her blood pressure medication at a different time, and she's noticed this before. And I was like, like I start freaking out a little bit because I'm the kind of person where if that happens, I want to take care of it right away because I also don't want to be the one that says, oh, yeah, it's no big deal, not going to call the doctor, and then 6 months later you finally do, and then you find out something big was wrong. So I have all these kind of broken things, that I'm processing in the middle of this. And a couple weeks ago, we were sitting down, and she goes, yeah, I'm having that feeling again. And we were in our house. When did you take your blood pressure medication? Well, I took it at a different time, and I'm having that feeling. It's not as bad as when we were on vacation. So I immediately went into, well, you need to call the doctor and make an appointment. And she said, well, okay, I will. It's on Friday. I'll email the doctor. Because, you can do that. Follow My Health or whatever, Sharp has, you can email the doctor. And usually they get back, but it's Friday. And so I'm like, Friday, you're going to email the doctor, and you're going to, wait until Monday maybe, and they're going to call you back. And so I'm going through all this stuff in my head. And really, all from a loving motive, but I felt myself ramping up a little bit. And I was like, no, you need to call the doctor right now and talk to a human. And then if they don't have any openings in their schedule, maybe you can get one with a human, not on the email, because you're just going to get whatever they give you, right? And so I felt this, and seriously, you ever get in a place where you're having a conversation and you're like, loving, the conversation's going on, loving, jerk. You hit this moment, and you kind of know it. You're like, whoa, that was weird. I just crossed, and then you keep going. Jerk. And I could feel it right in the moment. It's like coming from this place where I'm trying to love her, and it's coming out super broken. And so we went back and forth, and I finally had to stop myself in the middle because the momentum was carrying me through. You ever get into a place where you're about to say something and you feel this whole thing and you're like, well, I'm all the way here. I might as well say the rest of it. Because you just can't help yourself. Or if you want to get, it's really important to get the last word in. So no matter what, you just got to put the cap on it and get the last word in. And so sometimes our momentum is carrying us through. My grandson, he is playing football right now. And I owe you $5, by the way. Just kidding. Bad joke. So Pastor Robert would be so proud right now. So he's playing football, and when he's playing football, he's actually really fast, my grandson. Sometimes he's rushing the quarterback, and when he's rushing the quarterback, he runs so fast that he's got so much momentum that all the quarterback would have to do is just like do this, and boom, and he goes right by him. And I was like, hey, Gavin, when you're rushing like that, run as fast as you can. But right when you get up to the quarterback, you got to kind of break your feet down and stop a little bit so you can be in place. And then you can move where the quarterback goes, and you'll be able to get him. And so he's been doing that lately. But sometimes our lives are like that when we're talking. It's like we get so much momentum. We're just like love, 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 jerk, and I keep going. Instead of stopping in the middle and going, whoa, 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 what am I doing right now? I'm projecting all this brokenness over on my wife, and I'm coming across like all negative and everything, and it's like super messed up. And so the challenge, the tension is there in all of that, of how do we surrender and submit in those moments. Okay, we're going to switch to the women now, right? The wives. The wives. Wives are called to submit to their husbands, but not in the way that culture defines it. I'm not talking about the UFC cage match, Conor tap out, I'm not talking about submission like in that kind of way. I'm talking about submission in the context of, again, the umbrella. The Apostle Paul lays it out there. Mutual submission, verse 21, and here's the wife's part and here's the husband's part. This is the wife's part. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as to the Lord. So that's one of the translations. I want to give you a translation that is more literal. A literal translation where you would literally take the words as they're written in Greek and just translate them straight over. That translation that we just read is good. It's totally legit. This one, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, says this, being subject to one another out of reverence for Christ, there's verse 21, wives to their own husbands as to the Lord. Did you know that the word submit is not actually in verse 22? The reason why it's in there is because it's in the concept of mutual submission. Paul's already lined it out in verse 21. You're mutually submitting to each other, and wives, you would mutually submit. You would submit to your husband. It's totally legit. That's totally how you would translate it, but it's in that concept. But see how we do it? We take that word, and it does this weird thing in us. And it shouldn't be weird. It should be very natural that we have this mutual submission with each other. I think this is the case, that one of the most important traits of a leader is knowing when to lead and when to follow. Knowing when to lead and knowing when to follow. Knowing when it's important, this is a really important thing to me, and knowing when it's really not that big of a deal right now. But something causes us to want to win all the time and be right all the time and anchor ourselves in that way. God's design for marriage actually honors both people. Honors both. That's the way he made us. Remember last week, Pastor Robert talked about this passage where Jesus is talking about what the Son of Man came to do. And he says, you know what it's like, all the rulers of the day right now, they lord it over each other, and they exercise their power and authority over people. Not so with you. Everyone needs to serve. And then he says this, for just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many, that we would serve, that we would surrender. Jesus gave up everything, came to this earth. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. I want to leave us with just a couple of practical takeaways. Practical things that hopefully we can practice on this week. Practice on as you prepare yourselves perhaps for this event later on in your life where you'll be married. But specifically for those that are. let's get into a giving contest this week. What would that look like? What would it look like if your reflexes were submission and that you just gave? So practice that. Practice giving. Don't practice taking. For God so loved the world that he took. No, he gave. So practice giving and get into a giving contest, not a taking contest, and see what that does. We're going to work on our reflexes in that way. Husbands, start saying loving things to your wife. Wives, start saying respectful things to your husband. Now, I know what you're going to say. Next week, you're going to find me and go, Pastor Darrel, I tried. I went to my wife. I said something loving, and she totally was disrespectful. See, I told you it doesn't work. Well, you might want to string a few of those together in a row. Maybe that hasn't been happening, and you might be at a place where you need to call a third party in. Somebody who can bring some outside counsel and guidance into the relationship to reset things in a place where you can move down the road to where you can say loving and respectful things to each other. I would say this too, that ask the Holy Spirit to guide you, to guide me. Literally, when you're praying, Holy Spirit, would you get my attention somehow? When I'm in the conversation and I'm, loving jerk, can you get my attention then, not over here? Can you just, whatever, elbow, kick, have somebody speak it into me? I invite you to get my attention so that I can be aware in that circumstance. And then learn how to stop the momentum. When we're being selfish, learn how to stop the momentum when we're speaking. Don't just get there, oh yeah, I might as well. And really be careful of this. Watch out for the verbal bombs, the big ones. You can't unhear those. Be very careful with big phrases. They're dangerous. We live in a world right now where people just go on social media and just drop a bomb. I haven't found that to be that helpful of a thing, to drop bombs on Sherry. Verbal, selfish. It never works. So that's why I love following Jesus. His ways work. When you think about it, when you think about that, how's that working out for you? All the things, how's that working out for you when you behave that way? Or how's that working out for you when you were selfish and unloving? And it doesn't work out ever. So be careful of the big bombs, verbal bombs, right? Be quick to listen and slow to speak. Practice losing. Practice not getting your way all the time. Really ask yourself, if you can, stop in the middle of a conversation. You feel it start to heat up. You feel that something's off, right? And sometimes you don't know how to get out of it, but you get in the middle of it and then stop yourself and say, is this really right now? Do I have to win this one? Can I just not? Most of the time, it's not that big of a deal, but we've strung the little things together over and over and over to where one time they become a big deal. And now the next time a little thing comes up, it's a big deal again. So learn to lose more. That's the way I would say it. I don't have to win every time. And it's going to create an atmosphere where you're giving, you're laying down your life for the other person, you're mutually submitting, and it's going to bring out the best in them. And when you bring out the best, when I bring out the best in Sherry, I will not, 100% guaranteed, I will not be able to outgive her. She just blows me away all the time at how she loves and gives. And I can't keep up. I wish I could. I can't. But it's that quest, right? When we're in that rhythm of life and your reflexes are there and you've learned through the crash and burns and through the struggling over the years, you've learned to be in a place where just intuitively, it just makes better sense that you can live in a thriving place when you surrender and lay down your lives for each other. So I want to pray for us as we wind up. Pray for healing, perhaps. Some of us might need a healing. We might need forgiveness. We might need contentment. Pray for maybe the opportunity for a third party to come along that would help us break out of the crazy cycle so that we can thrive. Pray that we would thrive. Pray that we would thrive in everything. So let me pray for us. Father, you are so gracious that you love us, and then you gave us this great unity, marriage, to be able to go through life with somebody and enjoy. But Lord, there's real struggles. The enemy just totally wants to shaft us all the time, God. But your ways are perfect, your ways are true, and we know that. Would you help us? God, would you bring healing into our lives where we need that? Would you bring peace into our lives when we need that? Would you guide us where we need to be guided so that we can actually do this? We can actually submit to each other? And God, would you bless us and help us to thrive? That's where we want to be, Lord. We want to live in that. In Jesus' name, amen.